Hello, everybody. Welcome to another Select webcast. My name is Todd Harris, Director of Product Marketing at Select, and I'm joined today, as always, lately it seems, by Carrie Beaulieu, Director of Product Management. Today's session will first introduce you to Select, and then we will show you a bit about how predictive analytics can help you as a buyer or planner or other optimize your merchandise buys. So before we get started, as usual, we have a few housekeeping items. All lines are on mute. This will be recorded. The replay will be available in the next 24 hours or so. And probably later today, I will have the slides up on SlideShare, so you can reference those too. And if you want to find us on SlideShare, just do a search for Select, by the way. Questions can be submitted anytime through the Q&A panel. So I'd encourage those anytime during the session is totally fine, or just wait till the end at the bottom of the hour and we can take them then. So let's get going. Select's purpose. Select offers a cloud-based predictive analytics platform. And what that means is that we help retailers understand how an individual customer shops in their store and how an online customer or individual customer in the store chooses from an assortment of products. And what this does in the end is it helps simplify the complexity of inventory and product assortment optimization throughout the merchandise planning process. And some of our customers, they're not listed here, but some of them are Urban Outfitters, Zipcar, Aldo, Saks Fifth Avenue. Each of them have their own unique assortment challenge. And as you can see the last bullet there, what that is that our underlying technology, so all the good stuff that drives these recommendations and drives all the analytics that drive this, is part of the top 50 greatest innovations to come out of MIT's AI lab, their artificial intelligence lab, alongside notables, and notables that are pretty obvious for you to hear, like the digital computer, robotics, email, among others. So we're in very good company there, and we're very proud of that. Does this look familiar to you? It should. Because this is the way that multi-million-dollar merchandise decisions, planning decisions, have been made for a long time. This has been made for a long time because it's been the gold standard, and maybe there's been no reason to change it. And it's been made this way for years, for a really long time, for decades. So why change now is the question. Well, we've got some pressures intensifying, some of the classic pressures that you've seen over the years that have gotten more intense lately. Shoppers expect everything available everywhere all the time, and retailers that recognize these expectations and the ones that act on it are the ones that are seeing success. And some of the other ones that don't are hurting, as we've seen in the news. Predicting demand has become a monumental effort, and most retailers that have tried to do this haven't been successful. And the result of that has been shown in some of the, maybe some of the you're aware of in your own organization, some of the excess safety stock and some of the poorly optimized inventories that you might see. And we've seen this reflected in the news, as I mentioned earlier, in the form of lost sales, closing stores, shrinking margins, and profits dropping. So what we have here is decisions based on this. Excel, gut instinct. That's okay to a degree, but may not fully meet the challenges that are out there today. So let's look at a relatively simple example. This is not really simple at all if you really look at it here. You'll see in a minute. So we take an American luxury department store. There's really no, just to add something to this, there's really no predictive model which can really handle the complexity of retail. But that's why we're here. There's really no way to look at this from a human eye or from a spreadsheet and be able to understand the complexity or make actual decisions looking at this here. So if we look at this here, we see the amount of money spent annually on shoes at this department store, around 250 million. Invest a lot of their budget towards shoes. They've got about 100,000 shoe types or SKUs, over 52 stores, so spread across 52 stores, each with a limited amount of space. And of course, they've got their customers and millions of customers. So how can they actually make decisions on how to spread those shoes across all different stores, different SKUs, different types, sizes, colors, styles, and meet the actual demand, to meet the demand from those customers. That's a really difficult decision to make, all while trying to avoid stockouts for that, for that hit style. All right, it's the last thing you want. And of course, the opposite of that, avoiding markdowns too, losing that profit margin. So yeah, your job's hard, and decisions like that and situations like that don't make it any easier. And the process of drawing conclusions and extracting actionable information from that isn't easy at all. So now that we've stated the obvious and really beat that horse, we want to show how there is a better way, right? So we want to show the light at the end of the tunnel here. And this is part of what we have today and why Carrie is joining us. And she's going to walk you through some of the specifics around our solution and how it can help in some of these situations. But yeah, there is a better way. And the data you have is data you have. It's right underneath your hands there. You just got to be able to use it. Inventory data, CRM data, browse data, all sorts of data, and being able to understand customer choice and understand the interactions of products with your customers and how each of them influences each other. That can be very powerful when you can combine that with your existing knowledge and intuition. So what is this predicting customer choice? And what do we even mean by this? And what we mean by this, and this is, by the way, this is the basis for a lot of for everything that we do. All of the analytics that we talk about is based on this, our ability to predict customer choice. And like I mentioned on that first slide, that's the technology, that's the underlying technology that's been partial to our success. So what's happening is that there are valuable and continual experiments going on with each customer interaction in your store and on your website. And what this does in the end is that it reveals a powerful signal of preference and buying signals. Not only do we consider what you normally have, what customers bought, which you know, but we also look at what they didn't buy. And what they didn't buy but was also available to them during the time of purchase. And that data, by the way, is data that's often thrown away to the side or not really paid attention to, but it actually is very, very important, because that plus all the other data I mentioned before, transaction logs, product information, shipping information, receipt information, when we take all of that data, we aggregate it and scale it across all transactions, the result is a very powerful and accurate demand prediction. And what this does is helps you with inventory and assortment issues and challenges throughout the merchandise process. This is a choice modeling that we're talking about. And this is what drives everything that we do. So why don't we get into a little bit here about how this choice modeling, how this predictive analytics actually impacts buys. What we want to do here is just make sure that you see how your buys can be more productive, more efficient, with less wasted inventory overall, fewer markdowns, stockouts, and like that little bullet there, which should actually be a bigger bullet, is make sure those big buys sell big, and make sure the small buys sell small. So be consistent and be accurate. That's what drives success in retail. So when we move forward here, we'll hand it over to Carrie.
Great.
And she'll take us through.
All right, excellent. Welcome, everyone. So I want to talk through is our buy optimization module. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about it, show you a walkthrough with some screenshots and give you an overview of it. So what it all does start with is your buy sheet. And so if many retailers use their buy sheets as a way of tracking the styles that they intend to buy. And so the version we have here will contain one row in this buy sheet represents one style, and it will contain a lot of interesting and useful information to our optimization. So for example, it will contain information about the style, such as a description or class, brand, vendor, that type of information. And then it will have a whole set of product attributes. This is really important, very important to our model. So the choice model that is used as part of this module is modeled down to not just the SKU store level, but also the product attribute level. So these attributes that you tell us about the styles you want to buy are how we relate these new styles that nobody's ever seen before to the styles that historically we have in our data and we have history about. So we tie these new styles by these product attributes to your historical styles and learn a lot of information that way about how we predict that these new styles will perform. So, you know, as much as you have around silhouette, material, sleeve length, those types of things, that would be provided in the buy sheet. In addition, we'd request the, you know, color count. So if the prediction would be very different if you intend to buy 6 colors versus 1 color. It also contains information about the number of stores you plan to send this style to. So is it an all-store buy, or are you just going to send it to your lower volume stores? That also would impact the prediction. And then there's information around how much the buyer had planned to buy and whether or not there's a sell-through target. And so all of that information goes into your buy sheet. It's all relevant information into the optimization. And so our tool, assuming that you manage this in Excel, which is very common these days, you could just simply upload that buy sheet into our tool and click that optimize button. And it would take these styles and optimize them against our choice model that we've already built. If you happen to have buy sheets in an assortment planning tool, you can also build an integration in and pull this data directly from your tool. So really, there's different ways that you can get this data in, but the idea is these are the type of data that we require for the optimization. So once you optimize it, you would get to this screen, which you'll see here, there's a set of summary data at the top, so I'll just bypass that for a minute, but you get down to this buy sheet view. And so basically a row here represents the exact row that we just saw in the buy sheet. One row here represents one style. A lot of these first columns are just pulled directly from that buy sheet. And then you'll see a set of new columns. There's a set of columns here around Select prediction on these styles. And so I'll draw your attention to the first one, which is that predicted retail net sales. This is our prediction of net sales demand for that given style, taking into account the number of stores that you said you wanted to send it to, as well as your sell-through target if you have one. So this number here, you know, in the first row is 5134, would be sort of an apples-to-apples comparison with that retail buy quantity, that 5,500, which is, again, that is the number that that planner had intended to buy of that style. You can also compare the retail buy quantity rank is, again, the buyer's rank, so that's their intended biggest buy. There's also a rank here for the way that Select is predicting these as well. So you can just look at big buy versus small buy and see if even your buys are ranking about the same as what ours would have been. And then the last column here is the optimized by quantity. This is essentially the actionable column. There may be, you may have some business rules that you want applied. You may not want to just take Select prediction and use that number. You may want to apply some business rules on top of it. Maybe it's minimum presentation. Maybe it's related to merging the buyer's number and Select's number. There's a set of rules that you could apply so that this number is actionable and you could actually use it to make the actual buy. So from this point, you might want to actually drill into one of these. So let's say one of these styles has a number that you are surprised by. Maybe it's higher or lower than you thought it should be. So you could click directly on it and get to some additional information for each style. So you'll see here there are 2 tabs on the details page here. Associated products. This will show you the top 20 styles that are most relevant to the given style based on the product attributes that we know about that style that we're predicting for. And it gives you the score is essentially the rank of how closely it is associated to that new style. So this gives buyers a good opportunity to come in and say, oh, this one is, actually being seen very similar to these last year that maybe didn't do very well. And that helps me understand as a buyer that, the prediction is lower because it has a lot of the same attributes as these. So maybe it actually will perform a little bit under than what I was thinking about because I wasn't associating those together.
And Carrie, those are all styles or the associated products that are in the buy sheet, or could it be outside of this buy sheet, looking at other products that might exist in there?
So the buy sheet I've selected here, Sweet Henley. This is the row that I've selected, and these are the styles that have already been sold, that we have actually transaction and inventory information on, that have been purchased, over the past year potentially. Maybe they're selling right now. Maybe they sold a year ago during the same season. But these are styles that we have a lot of information on, and we can use that information to determine how this new style, how we predict it will do.
Right.
And then if we hop over to the attributes tab, this gives you two different pieces of information. The left-hand side just basically gives you all of those attributes that you saw in the buy sheet. So it's just a good way of going in and refreshing your memory on some of the information. On the right-hand side is a chart that what you see here on the y-axis is the attributes associated to this Sweet Henley style. These are all the relevant attributes and how these attributes performed last year, right? So what this will tell you is, oh, my print, my attribute 6 print performed very well last year. That is highly predictive. So that attribute associated to my Sweet Henley is actually making this a very, pushing up the prediction. Versus any attributes down in the red to tell me that attributes about this product are actually pulling down my prediction, because those attributes did not perform well over the last year. So this gives you an attribute by attribute view of how to think about how your attributes did last year and how that performance impacts the predictions that we're giving you right now. So if you have an opportunity, for example, to if you're in a design, if you design your own products and you develop your own products, and you have an opportunity of changing something about the design, you could actually use this to say, oh, if I actually made this, didn't make this a sleeveless top, but I made it, a short sleeve top, that actually might push up the prediction for this product. So if I go back to, so I was looking at the buy sheet view, and now I'm looking at this attribute view. So what this tells me is this lists all of my attributes and attribute values here in this table. But I just, for example, focus on the first 3. So they're all attribute 1, tops, basic, fashion tees. What this basically tells me is that the way that the buyer had to put it into the buy sheet was split to 37, 48, 13%. Right, so the basic tee took up about 48% of all of the styles in that buy sheet. And when you look at Select's prediction, it actually changes those percentages. So it actually, increased the buy tee percentage and decreased the other 2. And so this view just basically gives you an opportunity to look across your attributes and see how, Select's predictions would have modified those percentages. And then in case that would impact, maybe you really want a higher percentage of a particular attribute in your stores. There's a little bit of the art and science there. So maybe there's a reason why you do want more of an attribute than Select predicted. This would give you an opportunity to review that before you made any final decision. And then from here, you can also just download the report. So there's the download report button. If you click on that, that would download your initial buy sheet with the addition of all of the new columns of Select's predictions and ranks and all of that. So you would be able to take that and use that in some way. Again, if you're using a assortment planning tool, you could also build an integration here to take those values and actually, put them directly into your planning tool in a cleaner integration. So that's a little bit about the tool. So the next thing I want to do is just walk you through how we measure the results of using this tool. So how do we know that we do actually improve by accuracy? So I'll walk you through a couple examples of how we would typically do this. So let's assume for a minute that you've used this, you've made the purchases that were recommended, and you're tracking along with, you save off your buy sheets, so you have the relevant information. What we would typically do after that product has been put in the stores, has sold through the life of the item. So, if you expect it to sell full price in 8 weeks, it's gone through that full time frame, and you know exactly how many sales actually happened. So then what you would do, and how we typically would measure this, is you compare what that actual regular price sales info was, the number of units they actually sold in that 8-week period, for example, and you compare that number to the original planned buy quantity. So that was the number that the buyer put into the buy sheet, so what they were planning to do. And we think about that as just the buyer's prediction, right? Both of these are predictions. That was what the buyer expected would sell. And then you also compare that to Select's demand prediction, so what we predicted would sell during that same time period. And then when you compare those numbers, you measure a few things. We look at markdown units and lost sales units. So if you purchased more than what was actually sold, that difference is essentially markdown units, right? If you, at the point where full price sales ends, you mark them down, and the number of units remaining would go on markdown. If you ended up buying fewer than the number of units that could have sold at full price, the difference there is what we call lost sales units. Because if you had purchased more, you would have actually sold more. And so once you have the units on both sides of that, for both predictions, both the buyers, original buyers and Select, then you also, we put a dollar value on each of those units. So, and the interesting thing here is, you know, the formula for these are really up to each customer. You might think about one markdown unit being equivalent to one lost sales unit in terms of dollars, or they might not be. So the example here is for markdown, to calculate the markdown dollars, it would be the number of units times the cost of the style. Whereas on the lost sales side, it would be the lost sales units times essentially the margin, you know, the price minus the cost. So in those formulas are, you know, different people view it differently. It really is up to each customer to figure out how they want to measure it. But this is one common example of how we do that.
Right, and we can adapt to that
as
needed.
Right,
because everyone does measure things differently that way. There's a few set ways to do it, I'm sure. But, yeah.
Yes, absolutely. So just showing you 2 examples of this. So here's you know, particular style sold for retail at 68, the cost was 17, and you see that the regular retail, the regular price quantity was just over 5,000, 5,008. The buyer predicted, you know, would have put in or would have purchased 78.56, and Select predicted 51.04. So here you see that the Select number was pretty much spot on, which this is a real example. So we can't pick this one pretty well, but this was a very good example. And when you do the math, right, you see that for markdown units, they would have had 28.48, we would have 96, and you multiply that by that $17 to get to just dollar value. So for this example, you take the 48,416, subtract out the 1632, and then you get to, for this example, Select saved over $46,000 for this one particular style, right? Which is
among how many styles roughly were there in this case? You know,
this was
that scale up is the question.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of styles for this particular batch. We were looking at about 100 in that given month. Okay. And just to give you a flavor of a different way of calculating it when there are lost sales involved. So here's another example where the regular price sales quantity was 29.48. The buyer would have bought more. They would have bought 41.35. Select would have bought less, 25.11. And so when you do the math here, you see that the customer would have had about 1,100 markdown units. Select would have had about 400 lost sales units. So from a unit perspective, Select would have won quite a bit. But then when you do the math on the dollar value, Select still wins, but not by as much, because from their perspective, a lost sale is not as good as in a markdown. They would rather have more markdowns than lost sales. So here we still, you know, save $14,000 on the style. And we saved a lot on the unit difference, but you know, they prefer to have more markdowns. So it's still a win, but it's not as much of a dollar value win as it would have been if you know, one lost sale equaled one markdown in terms of dollar value. So those are the 2 examples I wanted to talk through, but that's our typical approach for measuring how we can improve buyer efficacy.
Yeah, it's pretty compelling. So like Carrie said, those were the two best examples that could show some of the some of the ways that we go about this. I guess they're not all like that, but they are all pretty darn compelling. So just to kind of sum up where we're at here, I didn't go over the actual platform itself, but we do have multiple solutions as part of the Celect optimization platform, and everything for us revolves around that word optimization. And I mentioned this before about optimizing inventories and assortments, and that's exactly what we do here. The cool thing about the buy optimization solution that we're talking about today is that it uses your own buy sheets, right? And you have your own buy sheets in Excel that you use today. And like Carrie showed you, it's a relatively simple process to upload it and then see the results using your own attributes and your own defined styles based on your own buy sheet. So I definitely want you to keep that in mind. So as we were going through, there were a couple of questions here, and I want to make sure those get addressed. First one I want to touch on, Carrie, because this is actually great. I'm going through a few of them right here. Well, you know what? Let me throw this one at you, Carrie. And if we can't get an answer to them today, we will get everyone an answer afterwards. First question is, how do you measure lost sales units? I guess, how do you know how many units would have sold if you'd bought deeper?
Right. Okay. Yeah. No, that's a great question. So there's two different ways that you can figure that out. One is if there is a sell-through target that is less than 100%. So let's say you have a 80% sell-through target. Then that means that you would have purchased more than you would have expected to sell through at full price. So if you start to eat into that remaining 20% at full price sales, then you know that you could have purchased more to get to that, to hit your 80% sell-through target. So your actual sell-through might have been 85%, and your target's 80. So that difference of what you sort of oversold more of will tell you exactly, you know, how many lost sales you had, because we would try to like hit your sell-through target exactly. If your sell-through target is 100% and then you didn't buy anymore, then it's a little bit harder to know. But how we would typically do that is we would, if your time frame was 8 weeks for the life of item for full price sales, we would model up to 6 weeks, for example, kind of see what the pace of buying is, and then sort of extrapolate the rest and sort of figure out how much more you would have needed to keep up sort of the sales curve that we expect to see during that time period.
So as I was going through some of the stuff before, another question came up about the actual buy sheet itself. When I was saying you can use your own buy sheets, I guess the question is, Carrie, do you have to use a specific structure, or does it have to be organized a certain way in order for us to actually process it?
So by default, we have a set of attributes that we need for the optimization. You know, the specific names of those attributes aren't important, but we need specific types of things. So we'd work with you to basically tell you what the required attributes are, and if they're called something different, that's fine. And you know, so it's not a specific template that you must follow. It's sort of working together to figure out what's the right thing, so that we're getting the data that we need, but it also works within the data that you have.
Fair enough. Last question I want to get to is there's someone that asked, how do you actually get started with something like this? Is there I assume there's a data gathering process was the question, and after the data gathering, is there a self-serve interface, or how does that work?
Yes, great. So our typical process is that we offer what we call an opportunity assessment. This is an 8-week engagement where we work with you to get the data that we need to build the model. So it's things like transactions, inventory, products, all of that. And we read that data in, build the choice model, and then we use that model to basically show you for a historical time period how we would have predicted versus what actually happened. So we call it backward simulation, where we load up data up to a certain time period in the past, predict for the future of that time period, but that what we're predicting for is still in the past to now. And then we have all the actual sales for that same period of time, and we can actually do all of this calculation, the markdown, the units and lost sales for what's actually already happened so that we can actually compare what we would have predicted and what we would have recommended to you versus what you actually did and what actually sold. And we can do that all during this 8-week assessment.
What do you think about one more question? One more?
Sure.
Yeah, all right. I think you can answer this one, and it's actually a really good question. Is it possible to provide an average buying quantity accuracy? I don't think we showed that as part of the breakdown, but is that a metric we could?
Average
buying quantity accuracy. She mentioned, as you've mentioned, 98% accuracy indicated on slide 21 is probably a very good random sample result.
The sell-through target is what I had shown. Yep.
That is that one.
Yep.
Right?
Yeah.
Yes, I mean, we would definitely report that as part of our overall plan. So we would get you this, what you're seeing here is one example of a style. You would basically get all of these across all of the styles that we're testing during that time period. And then you would absolutely be able to summarize all that up across those styles.
Perfect. So we've got 6 other questions we will not be able to get through. There's no way we can get through them all, I don't think. But I think what we're going to do, we're going to take each of these and we're going to write them out and have answers for everybody. And if it's worth sharing them to everybody, which it looks like all of them are at this point, we'll use that as part of a recap afterwards and get everyone the answers in a more, official way. So hopefully that works, everybody. And thank you for your time today. We asked for a half hour, we went a little bit over, but we will send out slides and we'll send out the recording in the next day. And in the meantime, if you have more questions, you can submit them here right now, and we'll get a report afterwards and be able to reference these and send you answers. But also, if you want to send emails afterwards, if you don't already have a contact here at Celect, feel free to send to me. It's Todd, T-O-D-D, @select.com, or you can send right to Carrie. It's Carrie, C-A-R-R-I-E, @select.com. So again, thank you for everybody's time, and we will see you the next time we do this. Take care.